Hello, we are back in the haunt labs of Life Intrigued. If this is your first time, welcome. Please check out our introductory video down in the description. It gives a little more about us as well as our haunted trail. It also has our restrictions and disclaimers. If you're returning, I'm going to bring you something different today. Now the first video we went through one of our signature animated props. In our most recent one, we walked you through an accessory for our Freddy Krueger character. Today we're going to bring you a tool that we use constantly here around Intrigued, and that's our custom foam cutter. Like the rest of the haunt community, we rely heavily on the foam insulation panels for a lot of our static props, such as our carving and sculpting and fake stonework that we use. A good example of that is our tombstones. Now we've been making illuminated tombstones now for several years. Those take a lot of foam fabrication, a lot of straight cuts, and a lot of angled bevel cuts. And it's really nice to be able to use this tool to be able to fabricate those really quickly and save us a lot of time. Now the way this works is the flat side here is made for making straight cuts. So all we need to do is open this up, loosen these knobs to whatever desired opening that we want. Piece of foam here. Slide that foam in. Adjust that to the line that we want to cut on. Say just for examples that. Tighten it back down on both sides so it's secure. And then simply use the guide to run a straight cut all the way down through the foam. Now we use the Hercules hot knife for all of our cutting. The dual blade here makes it fairly rigid, allows us to follow then the board is be able to cut that all the way down. Real nice and simple. Now you could also use just your standard insulation foam cutter. Same principle, just follow the wood form, cut it all the way down, you'll get that nice straight line. Now this happens to be 2-inch foam. If we want to cut our more common 1.5-inch foam, all we need to do is swap out these bolts. Go ahead and take this out, put that over here. But if I simply exchange these bolts here for a shorter one, I think these are 4 inches for the 2-inch foam. These are 3.5 inches. Best for the 1.5-inch foam, which we use most often here at Life Intrigued. So just slide that through. Put the knob back on. Do the same for the other side. Back open. Now here's the 1.5-inch foam, the Foamular. I believe it's extruded polystyrene. Now we use this probably more than any other foam size. So all we have to do is again slip that into the opening. Clamp these down again, just so it stays while we're cutting it. And you can see, again, you're just going to cut right down that flat side and get a nice straight even cut. Now the other side is what we use to cut our angles and bevels. Now for that, we have to take the bolts completely out. But now with an angle, we won't have that need for that flush cut. So I'm just going to pop this off. Go ahead and take this bolt off and this bolt. So now this is more manual. We're going to use the other side of the cutter. Flip both of these around so you can see it. I go point out how this side works. So this top piece has a 45 angle cut in it. That allows me to put the knife at an angle and get that cut all the way down. And the bottom is more rounded. It's got this rounded side, and that just allows the blade to run smoothly down that edge. So we're going to put the rounded side, we want the rounded edge on the bottom. We're going to put the foam on it where we want that. Let's say we're going to put it at the edge because we want say a 45-degree cut on this edge. So since this is 1.5 inches thick, if I come back 1.5 inches off of that edge, we'll clamp these down on both sides with regular clamps, shop clamps. And then if we run our knife down through there, staying with the angle created by the two boards, we will get a 45-degree cut on our foam. Now we're going to demonstrate that for you a little later in the video, just so you see how that works. Now the first one we made here, first foam cutting guide we made here, was essentially made out of 1-inch by 3-inch boards, solid oak, cut down to size and finished off. It's only a 3/4 inch thick, and it's only 2.5 inches wide. And then we bought originally an 8-foot board of that and cut it in two to get 2 4-pieces. And that's how we got the links for the current one we have today. Now that ended up being a mistake, which I'll explain in a minute. Now on the other side, for the angles, notice that that's rounded there. Now we could have went and sanded a lot and got that same type of profile, but instead what we did is we took 1-inch quarter round, and I got a sample here, slightly different, and actually just glued that to the edge of the board. So that gave us that nice rounded profile without having to do a lot of sanding. Now it turns out for the other top here, the top piece of this, which I mentioned was a 45-degree angle. And the reason for that is so we could get the angle that we wanted and run that slide down there. If it was the straight piece of wood, demonstrated on this, we'd be just running on that very thin edge all the way down. You actually can get a lot of wobble with that. But we can never find the 45-degree edges at Menards. So what we did is instead we bought another round, quarter round, and glued that to the top as well. And at the end, after we had it glued, we came back and ripped a 45-degree angle on that on the table saw. So that's how we got that. Using the same quarter round on each side also guaranteed us that we're the exact same thickness then. Which I'll show here. These are a little bit twisted. So again, each of those exact same thickness here. Now one's got the 45 and one's rounded. So that's the only difference there. We're going to actually make a new one. We thought we'd bring you along and show you how we made it. Now we're going to step up a little bit and use a 4-inch board. I actually have the actual board here. These are red oaks from Menards. This is a 1x4x8. Now we're only going to need 5 foot. Remember the previous one was 4 foot. We're going to make these 5 foot instead. But I couldn't find any 6-footers, and so we had to buy 2 8-footers, which means even more pricey than they already are. So this red oak, 1x4x8, now that's 3/4 by 3.5, and it was 8 feet long. So if you read here at the bottom, select grade, surfaced 4 sides. Now what that translates to is about $4 a word. So it's like 23 bucks for this particular board, and we had to buy 2 of them. So if you can get the 6-footers, I think they're around 17 bucks, so a lot more reasonable. So down here in the small tiny print is where they admit to being only 3/4 inch by 3.5 inch, and then of course the length is set at 8 foot. So it's the smallest print you got to watch, but 3.5 inches still work fine for us for what we want to do. We went with the same 1-inch quarter rounds Again, we got 2 of those, and we'll glue those right on the edge of both boards and come back and cut that top one at a 45. So the gluing part takes some time to dry, so we're going to teleport you down to the manufacturing lab and get that going. Okay, so one of the first things we need to do is to attach the corner rounds to the actual plank here. So that takes some drying time, so we're going to get that out of the way now. So the one thing that we do not want is to have any metal that comes in contact with our cutter because of the heat and the electricity in that. So we don't really want to use any brads to put that together. There's also no reason to go with dowels or anything because we're not going to be putting a lot of pressure on that that needs that real strong bond. So instead, we're just going to glue that onto the edge here. Now I used standard wood glue for the first one we made. That held fine. I'm going to switch to the Great Stuff Pro Construction Adhesive for this time, just to give it a little more bond. Also makes it a little faster drying time as well. So all I'm going to do is run a bead of this foam down the edge of the plank here. I might put some on the round as well, and just attach those. And the key thing is that you do not want that to come apart from the plank. So you want that to be very flush all the way down. So I'm going to use clamps to keep that together. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now we're just going to run this foam bead down the edge of the plank. Okay. Wood glue worked fine. It just takes a little longer for it to dry, but it works just as good. So let me close this off. Gonna lay this flat. Now the quarter rounds I did cut a little longer than the plank, and I'll clean that up after all glued, but just want to make sure it covers both ends. Put it on there. Now the nice thing about the adhesive that it does stick pretty quick, so it's staying against there pretty nice. But I am still going to put clamps on there just to make it tight. Want the other end. And a couple in the middle. The other way, just to even out the weight. It was coming off the table, and we want this to stay flat in order to get that nice, smooth bottom. You can already see that foam is starting to expand. And the main thing is I want the round and the plank to be flat on the table. That's fine. Now I'm going to come back, even though it expands, I'm going to come back and sand this all, so it doesn't matter if there's some excess there. But that should give me a nice tight bond of that quarter round to the plank. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and while I'm off camera, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side of this. So.
20 minutes later.
Okay, while that's still gluing, I went ahead and got the other one done. Now you notice that the quarter round here is now glued to the plank. Nice and flush on the back side. I mentioned before, I cut the ends of the rounds a little longer just because I don't like chop sawing something that thin. So now I'll go back once it's all glued and I'll square up those edges and make a match with the other one. So That's what it's going to look like when it's all done. I'm going to let these continue to dry a little bit. In the meantime, I'm going to take you out and show you how we actually use these forms to cut our foam. Okay, we finally got a break in the rain, so we thought I'd come out here and give you a quick demonstration of how the foam cutter actually works. We're going to use the original one here. And the first thing we're doing is going to take this expanded foam, the 2-inch expanded polystyrene, and we're going to use the same process we used to make our tombstones, the base. So I'm going to cut off the corners here, add some angles to make the beveling for the base of the tombstone, and then I'll show you how we do the straight cuts and how we do the angles. And when I'm done with that, I'll go to the extruded foam and show you that as well. Now, the expanded foam doesn't give off toxic gas when it's heated, so we can do this without a mask, which is why I want to do it first. So I've laid out some lines here. Basically, again, we're going to cut off the corners, and then we're going to come back and we're going to put a 1-inch bevel on that, 1 inch off the top here, and we'll show you how to do that. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to make the straight cuts. We're using the straight cut side of the form. Just going to line up those corners here. Now for these, I don't have to clamp it down. I can just hold it while I'm doing it. So as I mentioned before, you could use the straight foam panel cutter and just cut right along that. We prefer to use the hot knife. So we're going to go ahead and use that for ease. Just going to heat this up. And you'll want to keep that dual knife, the two blades of the knife, against the two pieces of the wood to make your straight cut. So make sure we're out from the stand. Put them against. Just go straight across. It's easy as that. Now, again, you just want to go along that side and keep those blades there. If you push too hard, you're going to get a concave cut into your foam. So just go along there smoothly, straight across. Don't apply any more pressure that pushes that in, and you'll get a nice, straight, clean cut. Okay, now we're going to move to the angle cuts, which we're going to do on each of the sides now. And to do that, I need to take these bolts off. And we're going to use then this angled side. You're going to have the one with the 45-degree edging on it on the top. So I'm going to put the other one on the bottom. Now I'm just going to use, for the bottom, I'm just going to use the edge of the foam. So I'm going to line that up right there. And then the top piece, which is going to create our angle, I'm going to put 1 inch off of that edge. Make sure that's flush. Here. And since I'm not using the bolts, it's a little longer, I'm actually going to clamp this down. Okay. So I'm going to keep the blade against the two pieces of wood, run that along, and that should give me my angle cut that I'm looking for. Let's do the other side. And there we go. Now this, we would have another 2-inch piece of foam underneath this just to stack it up, but it would start becoming the base of our tombstones. So So now I'm going to switch to the extruded foam. And I basically have a sample here. I thought I'd just square this up real quick. Now we're going to put in, just going to do flat cuts on this. You saw how the angles work. Open that up. Just going to grab this here. Just going to straighten this edge up a little bit. Now this is the extruded polystyrene. When that gets hot or it's burnt, it puts out very toxic gas. So for that, highly recommend that you're outdoors with good ventilation, and that if you can, wear some kind of protective breathing apparatus. Okay, don't need to show you more of that. But basically, just demonstration showing we can get pretty straight cuts. Just trying to square this off. That's how it works. One side's for the flat cutting, other side's the angles. And then now to show you the reason why we wanted to make a new version of this. I said we're going to do some upgrades. The first upgrade we need to do, which is easy to talk about, is I'm going to recess these bolts. That allows me to lay this flat against whatever surface I happen to be cutting on. The other big problem we had,
I'll be back,
is the standard foam sheets come in 4x8. And I mentioned before, when we bought it, we thought we were being clever. Bought an 8-foot board and cut it in half. That gave us 2 4-foot boards. Unfortunately, that doesn't give you the distance you need to cut the 8x4. So we had to take the bolts off, and then kind of a pain to get the two pieces then lined up manually and cut across, because that distance, we came in I think 1 inch on each side. So that only gave us 2 inches short of 4 feet. So that wasn't enough. So the new one, that's why we went with 5 feet, so we can get those holes, the maximum distance of the holes, more than 4 feet apart. So now we're going to do a little sanding, get that out of the way so we can make the cut. Now the next step in the process is to sand the actual boards themselves. It's real important that the side that's going to be against the foam is going to be smooth as possible. Also, on the one that we're going to cut the 45 on, we want to make sure that that side that's going to be against the table for the cutting is smooth as well, so we get a nice even cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit it hard with a 60 grit just to get that adhesive foam off that I didn't get all off with the razor blade, and then probably come back with a 120 or more just to give that nice finish. Now you do not want to do much sanding at all, if any at all, on this running edge here. You want to use the factory cut because you know that's straight in most cases. In this case it is. So you don't want to do much sanding on the actual edge that the blade is going to run on. Same with this side. For the flat cutting, maybe want to hit that just to get off any frays, any splinters, but don't do a lot of sanding because you don't want that to wobble at all or be wavy. So I'm going to do a little bit of sanding here. Probably won't subject you to it at all, but we'll get started here on my mask.
Only knew the power of the dark side. No, I am your father.
15 minutes later.
Pretty smooth now. Definitely the one side that's going to be against the foam is pretty nice. And I'm going to go ahead and do the sanding on the other piece of this off camera, so you don't have to sit there and watch me go through that. So the next step is to cut that 45-degree angle on the top piece. So that's what we're going to do next. I mentioned before that we're going to use a rip saw to get that edge. I decided not to do that and went ahead with a router instead. Either way is fine. Router allowed us to be flat all the way as we moved it through the router. The 45-degree now on the edge, and then that should line up with the quarter round then on the other side that we left alone. So that will make up the two pieces right there. Welcome everyone to the home stretch. We're in the final phase now of our upgrade to our foam cutting guide, and that is to put in these pins that lock it in place when we're cutting. Now for our pins, we use 5/16 bolts, smooth shanked. And that's so when we move our boards back and forth, those threads don't rip up the holes. So we want the smooth shanked 5/16. And we use knobs, 5/16 knobs of course. But the main part of that is to make sure you have the pass-through knobs so that when the bolt's longer, it'll pass through the knob and not provide any issues with stopping too short. And you can get these knobs at Menards in their specialty section. If you're going to use 1.5-inch foam or 2-inch foam, which is our regular foam, you're going to want the 3.5-inch bolts as well as a 4-inch bolt to be able to accommodate the different sizes of foam. So we need to drill these holes in the foam cutting. This is the original one here, but it's critical, definitely on the flat side here, and actually on the other side as well, that these pins are put in perfectly, so this results in both halves being flush at the end here, so you get a nice straight cut. So we need to make those cuts, first starting with the flat side here, and we're going to make, I think we're going to make 4 this time. We had 5 in the original, and in the new one we're just going to have a set of 4. So let's look at the new one here. To do that now, I have put the two pieces of the new foam cutting guide together, blue tape just to keep them solid and flush, as well as clamp the two ends because I don't want any movement when I'm drilling that. We have a form here that we created, and I'll show you on the computer how we made that, as well as discuss the angles that we need for the other side. But for right now, I just used this form. I just laid it down so it's flush on the edge, and then went back with a marker and just marked where those hole placements are going to be. I did that for the ends. Now I want those 50 inches apart. That allows me to have a nice 4-foot distance, plus an extra 2 inches leeway to put that full foam sheet in. That's what we couldn't do with the original one. So with that, I actually just put 2 other places in just to give me some options to move those pins closer if I'm cutting a smaller piece of foam. Now for this first drill, I'm just going to drill that straight cut hole, which is in the back of the form. That's what I'm going to use when I'm cutting the straight side, which is the side towards me right now. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that one of those, line that up with where I put the hole in from the template, and want to keep this straight. going to put an extra little clamp here. Again, cutting all the way through based on those guidelines from the template. So I'm just going to do one here. Now I'm going to do that same cut for these other 4 here. Meanwhile, I'm going to take you to the computer and start explaining the angles that we're going to have to cut on the other side. I want to take a quick sidebar and explain to you how we got their offsets for our foam cutting guide. Now, it's going to take a little bit of math, but the good news is it's just high school trigonometry, and the answers are in the back of the book, so no need to worry here. So if you remember that week where you learned about the right triangle, that consisted of a leg A, a leg B here on the bottom, and then of course you had the hypotenuse C. And then you had 2 angles, angle capital A here and angle capital B here. And then of course we had the right angle right here in the corner, which is the 90 degrees, which gives it this name. So the key thing that we'll be using here is the equation that the length of B, lowercase b here, is side A divided by the tangent of angle capital A, which is this one right here. Okay, so if we look at our boards, we have this top board here, and we have the bottom board. Now I know ours has a little bit of a round here, but for our purposes here, we're just going to consider it comes to a point. In between these 2 boards is our foam. And if you look at that right angle that's formed by the tip of the top board that comes straight down to the board in the bottom, that is our right triangle, which we referenced up here. So using those equations, we know that A is simply the thickness of the foam. The lowercase a here, which is the length of the right side, is the thickness of the foam. And we know that B is the angle that we're looking to cut. So in our case, it's that 30 degrees or that 45 degrees that we've been talking about. Now, angle capital A is simply 90 minus that desired angle, which is capital B. And then B is what we're trying to solve for, that offset of that bottom board from the top. And again, that's the length of side A, which is the thickness of the foam, divided by the tangent of angle capital A, which is 90 minus that desired angle. So we use an example here. We want the 30-degree angle cut using the 1.5-inch foam. So A is 1.5. Angle capital A is 90 minus 30, which is 60 degrees. And therefore, the length of B, which is our offset, is 1.5 divided by the tangent of 60 degrees. If you do that equation, you get 0.867. Convert that to English units, and you get 7/8 of an inch. So I know that that top board has to be 7/8 of an inch back from that bottom edge of the board. And if I do that, I will get my 30-degree angle. Now I said we had the answers in the back of the book, and here they are. So this is the one we just did, that 30-degree angle here on the far left. The one next to it is if I using that same 30-degree angle, but using a 2-inch thickness of foam. If we do that equation, that's 1 5/32 for that offset. Now, the two 45-degree angles are really easy because the tangent of 45 is 1. So therefore, the length of side B, or our offset, is just simply the thickness of the foam. So 1.5 inch or 2 inches. So there's the offsets that we're using for our cutter. If you need to figure out different angles for your use, you can just simply use the same equation and get those offsets that you need to put in on your bottom board. So I did provide 2 templates. Links are in the description. This is the top one. This will go on the top board, and you'll line that up with this straight edge here, this bottom edge, to the straight edge side of that top board. And this tells you these red dots are where you're going to drill down through for each of those particular angles that you want to cut. So 45, 30, 30, 45. And then this one here is what you want to use for the straight cut when you're using that other side of the cutter to create those straight cuts all the way through. And then if you look at that, next slide, that has the template for the bottom board. This will go on top of the bottom board, essentially between your top and your bottom. And if you line this top edge with the edge of the curved end on the bottom, this gives you the offsets, these lines of how far back you're going to put that top board. So you can see the legend here on the left, and this is how far each of these lines will be, how far you bring that board away from that edge. And just for reference, these are the resulting holes, these red dots here, that will occur when you drill down. So I made this template so I would know that there's a good distance away from each of these cuts. So this is just how your bottom board's going to show up with those holes in it once you're done cutting them. And now I'm going to throw you back to the video. While I was taking you through the angles, I went ahead and finished those 4 holes like I mentioned. But now it's time to cut the angles. And that gets a little more complicated. So the first thing we need to do is, because we're going to have to shift the bottom board when we're putting in the hole in order to get those angles, I need to cut the 2 pieces back apart, basically cut that blue tape. Okay. So on the templates we're using, this is the one I used for the top. You can see how that goes on, just like that, flush, the holes. But now we need to drill these outer holes, which is the 2-inch 45, the 2-inch 30 degrees, the 1.5-inch 30 degrees, and the 1.5-inch 45. The reason I'm doing that is so when I want those 2 common angles that we cut a lot, I just have to move the boards to the right hole positions, insert the pins, and I know when I cut across there with whatever thickness of foam I have the angle I want. Since those are the dominant ones I use, I want to be able to get to those quickly. But if I need to, a different angle, I can simply take the pins out and do it the old way where I shifted it where I needed to be and just clamped it down. So the other thing, if you look at that other form, I already created lines on that second form template, the bottom template, which is the distances the board needs to be out, which is this distance here from the edge to the top board for each of those angles and foam thicknesses. Now if I put that out here, put that flush here, I need to put that board right on that line, and I'm going to do the first one is the 1.5-inch foam 30-degree angle, which is a 7/8 inch offset from the front of the bottom board to the edge of the top board. So I've put that on. I want to get that leveled all the way across. And then I'll drill that hole for the 1.5-inch foam 30-degree angle, which is this third one from the left, my left, as you count in off the template. I've got those marks so you can see that. So I need to put a hole straight down through that position I've made from the template. So let's clamp this so it doesn't move on us. I'll clamp the other end. Okay, so I don't want that to move. I'm going to drill right through at every third position, everywhere I want to make that cut, so the 4 places. So I'm just going to do this one right here that's closest. So I'm going to find the 1.5-inch 30-degree angle, which is right here. And then I'm going to make that cut drill all the way through. go ahead and make that same drill hole on the other 3 places. So now we have one of the common foam angles we have in the common foam thickness, which is the 1.5 inch foam, and at the 30-degree angle. So the next thing we're going to do is the 45-degree angle. So I'm going to take these pins out because I got to reposition the corner. Or the edge, I'm sorry, the front edge. So we're going to do the same process for this next set of holes. We're going to put our template on our bottom board. And if you recall, when we're on the computer, for the 45 degrees, I need to be at the same distance away as the thickness of the foam. And for this first one, it'll be the 1.5 inches from the edge, from the bottom edge to the top edge. So I'm going to put that here, line up my board all the way down, reclamp both ends. Same process we did before, just at a different offset from the bottom. So I find the template hole for the 1.5 inch 45 degree, which is to the right of the one we just drilled. Make sure everything's good, and drill that one. And that completes the holes we need for the 1.5 inch foam. Now we're going to move on to the 2 inch foam. Kind of bad lighting here, but basically you can see those bottom holes. This is the straight cut, and then we have the 2 angled ones on each side. So that was a lot of the work we did with that template to make sure none of those holes got too close and that there was plenty of wood between them so I wouldn't have any breakout. So I'm going to clean this up a bit, take the blue tape off. I'm actually going to chop saw the ends just so they're nice and smooth on both sides, and then maybe give it a quick sand as well. And then I'll take you back out and show you how we use the new guide and how everything came together in the end. So the rain has finally stopped so we can finish up this video. We just wanted to give you a final look at the new improved foam cutting guide. We've put a nice sand on it, being careful not to ruin this factory edge here because that's what we'll be cutting on. If you recall from the improvements from the first one, we can now handle a 4x8 sheet of foam, which is the standard configuration for those. So these are now far enough to put that 4-foot end in. We've got the pre-cut, pre-drilled holes for our angles for our different sizes foam, 2 inches and 1.5 inch. And I was going to countersink all of the bolts in so it would sit flat, but doing 20 of those seemed like a lot of work. So I just went and got some pads I found at Menards, these little foot pads, which are larger than the actual bolts I'm using. And I just put that down the whole length of the guide. And you'll see now that it also sits flush, it also won't move because of those firm sticking pads. So that was a good improvement. Now we just want to demonstrate it one more time with our pre-drilled holes. Now we're going to use the 30-degree angled cut with a 2-inch piece of foam for this final demonstration. So the first thing we need to do is take the bolts out that we used for the straight cuts. Now I am using the 4-inch bolts because we're using the 2-inch foam. You take the other one out. So I'm going to put the bolts through the 30-inch hole. Go ahead and put my foam in. Put the top board on, again through those 30-angle holes. A little stiff. The more we use it, the easier it'll be to get these in. Okay, let's just tighten these down. I'm just arbitrarily putting the distance I want on the end of the foam here. Tighten that down just so it won't move when we cut. Heat the gun up. Again, I want to stay against the two edges of the boards, which are now offset for that 30-degree angle. Sit there. There you have it. Note I used the expanded foam just so I wouldn't have to put on my mask, but be sure if you're using the extruded foam, the pink stuff, that you have some form of protection, and definitely outdoors so that toxic gas doesn't get in you. Just unloosen. I know that's a 30-degree angle, exactly what we want. Didn't have to do a bunch of calculations or drawing on the foam or figuring out what that offset needs to be. I know with the 2-inch foam, I've got a nice 30-degree angle. So with that, that's a wrap. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial on our foam cutter. We'll be using it extensively in an upcoming video we have how we make our illuminated tombstones. So until then, stay calm, haunt on, and thanks for joining.